So Daz, what are we talking about today?
Engine temperature. So a lot of times we talk about cooling your engine down. People are worried about their engine getting too hot, right? I think that not enough attention is paid to getting your temperature hot enough or warm enough, right? And this time of year, obviously I'm wearing a big freeze beanie. It's
Pretty chilly here in Melbourne.
It's pretty chilly. I've actually got a thermal top underneath, but it's really critical for the engine to be up to temperature. So with this particular bike, it's already up to temp, and I'll be doing all the small throttle positions first, like up to about 40%. And you'll see that the radiator is actually taped up a lot. Like when you look at it, you'll be a bit surprised by how much we've taped the radiator up. And that's because any less than that, I won't be able to get it up to temperature. And one of the interesting things that I think happens a lot this time of year, and it's probably even more particularly in road bikes, well, as much as track bikes, is that, you know, if you go for a nice ride, you know, even stuck in traffic around town, whatever, as you get leaving to go for a long ride, the bike's going to get to temperature while it's at lights.
Definitely, yeah.
But as soon as you start moving and start moving at any speed, you get a lot of airflow to the radiator. And with it being that cold, as we all know, we've either got heated grips or put really nice warm gloves on. You know what it's like when you've got cold hands.
If you've got the fancy bikes,
If you've got the fancy bikes, or just some good gloves, right? Your hands are getting cold. The same thing's happening to that radiator. And it wouldn't be uncommon to go for a ride in the twisties or in the hills this time of year and have your engine running like in the high 60s, like 68 degrees or 66. That's way too cold to be running your bike. As a rule of thumb, generally, the happiest place for an engine in terms of engine temperature, coolant temperature, is around the low 80s. Okay, so that's where it's going to be the happiest. We'd say between, you know, but on the road it's a lot harder to be exact, but we'd say between 75 and 95 when you're actually riding, that's okay. Anything less than 75 it's too cold. And a bit of a hint on that, all bikes, or most bikes have a thermostat, right, that opens and closes. It will open at around that 75, right? Because it's actually closed and restricting coolant flow through the engine because it wants it to get above 75 degrees. So that's what you should be doing. Now, if you ever watch racing, all forms of racing, in MotoGP and that, you have to look a little bit closely. But it's common to run tape on the radiator. And when I say in some of the world championships, you'll see it's actually like dark silver tape or reflective tape, and it's hard to see. But if you look for it, you'll see they actually got the radiator taped up. So and they're monitoring the engine temperature. And if it's too cold, the ambient temperature or the airspeed's too cold, they'll tape it up. We do the same with our race bikes. So it's really important to do that. And I'd even suggest doing it on your road bike. It's not hard to. Doesn't have to be that big, but take a little bit of...
or red, so
you could get red. Red's fast. White's
not as fast.
And we'll get some black stuff here. So if you're going to put that into your gear bag or whatever you're going on a ride and you're going for the twisties, it's a great idea to take some. Now, what could happen if you're riding along and going, oh, this thing's in the low 60s or high 60 or 68, just put a few strips on the radiator and the bike will run warmer. And you want, like I said, you want it to consistently be going for a twist. If it's in its low 80s, it's going to be way better. A couple of main reasons for that. There are a few reasons. If we're going to talk, because we've got a dyno here and that, we're going to talk about tuning. People may not know, but when the bike's cold, it's got a cold start program, and it even has compensation for when the engine's cold that actually throws more fuel at it. The bike will run richer when it's cold. It's normal in all engines. And then when it's around those low 80s, it's running in its kind of normal fueling map, and that's where it's going to produce its best performance, best throttle response, best power delivery. If it's running too cool, it's going to be a little bit too rich. Okay, and then you can start fouling plugs potentially. So if you're in the mid 60s and you're getting up your bike in the twisties or on a track day, the bike's running richer than it
That also affects throttle response, everything like that when it's a little bit rich,
Absolutely. So that's a big one there. Even more important is the engine components themselves. People may not be completely aware, and some people probably are, but in terms of metals, they expand, retract, and behave differently with temperature, right? Now, a key part of engine components is they're actually a little bit elastic. So when you think about a metal, like obviously, like if you got a piston or a conrod or a crank,
Yep.
if I was to whack you in the head with it, it's pretty hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you're not going
headache.
to, you would have more than a headache. You know, if you take a conrod, for example, again, if it's cold and we're just holding it in our hand, it would be quite hard. But once it gets to temperature and at speed, it's actually a little bit elastic, and they do stretch.
A bit malleable.
A bit malleable, absolutely, and they do stretch.
Yep.
Same if we would take a gear and a gearbox, is that the gears themselves, the material they're made out of, the metal they're made out, is actually a bit malleable, and they're a softer metal, so that they actually can absorb some shock. Because when you pluck the next gear, they go whack, right? So if they were too brittle and too hard, they'd break. And then they do a surface treatment on them, the surface harden them, to make just the edges or just the outer edges of that gear harder, so that it can deal with wear. Right, so that it can deal with wear of touching the other gears, right?
Yeah.
But it needs the elastic properties. Now, all those materials in these beautiful engines are a lot more brittle when they're cold. Same as if you've got cold hands and you catch a footy or whatever. That's right.
Yeah.
Same for these poor motors. So it's actually worse for your engine to be running it cold than it is to be running a little bit hot. Some people start freaking out, and we get a lot of inquiries, can you lower my fan temps because my bike's running in the high 90s. If your bike's running at 98 degrees while you're riding it, that's way safer than running it at 68 degrees. You can't have those materials too cold. And then all the tolerances. So when you're talking about your, your piston and your bore, and you're talking about all those tolerances, it's important to be up for temperature. You know, you've brushed on this before and asked questions, and people ask questions about running in their motors. And then they're like, you got to take it easy for the first bit. And, manufacturers will even advise first 1,000 Ks. Some
don't rev it over a certain amount.
Some even have a lockout so that when you have the first
they
service,
do. I think the BMWs do, don't they?
Yeah,
you can't rev them over a certain amount?
Yeah, and they have a lockout so that you can't actually rev it too much until you've run it in. It's way more important about the engine temperature when you're running it in than the revs. The revs are important, but if you were to continually run your bike at a low temperature, that's not good for it, especially if you're running it in.
Yep.
So the heat side, having the engine work in the right area is way better for it. So there are a couple of key reasons for that. As I said, the fueling, but the engine life, really important. And a simple way we can do that is just to put tape on the radiator. We would always encourage people to use a coloured bit of tape, like white or red or something that stands out, because if you use black, you might forget that it's on. And if you go for a nice ride in through the twisties, let's say if you're in Victoria and you're doing that in July, and it's cold, and you tape it up, have time of your life, come back, but then you're busy, park it away, don't ride the bike for 6 or 8 weeks. You might come to another day that now is like 23 degrees or whatever, and forget that there's tape on there if it's black, because you won't see it. The coloured or the brighter tape just remind you, you'll see it. It stands out. At the racetrack, when we do it, we still use coloured tape, but we don't really need to anymore, because we've got our pre-session checklists that actually have box air radiator tape. There's a big differentiator between knowing the temperature on track compared to in the pits. Once you come in the pits, the airflow's stopped, the engine heat from the whole session's there. The temperature on the dash is going to be a lot hotter than it was on track. When it's safe to do so in a straight, you should look down at the dash and just see what temperature that engine's running at. And your target is around low 80s, and that's brilliant for the motor. For its life, it's better. For horsepower, it's better. So
if it's around, I know some Yamahas, I guess R1s over the years, they always run a little bit hotter.
Well, here's the thing.
Is that's
a great question. R1s run hotter when they're stationary. But if you ever had one on track, you'd realise that they actually run really, really cool on track. And that's just, you think about it.
That's a lot of air rushing through the radiator.
Stick your head out a car window at 200 kilometres an hour. There's a lot of airflow. Now, if it's 10 degrees outside, you're going to have watery eyes. It's pretty cold, right? So that's why there's such a big difference. So it's important to understand the difference between it running hot when it's stationary at the lights and the fans are going and all that. That's fine. That's a way better situation than it running too cold. But when it's moving and when you're at speed, if you're going for twisties, if it's a cold day and it's still running hot, then you have another issue.
So if someone is using this tape on the road, just keep an eye on the temperature, make sure you're checking it every now and then, especially in traffic. And in the twisties, just looking for that range. So what, 80 to 95 you're saying? Or?
It's hard to be exact in all different conditions. So I'd just say, as long as you're between 75 and 95, you're okay.
Okay.
The ideal is low 80s.
Yep.
Low to mid 80s is where it's going to have its best performance. And that's a good point you bring up about the fans and in traffic. What a lot of people do the first time they ever put tape on the radiator, they're scared to put it right bang in the middle. And what they tend to do is they put it behind the forks.
Okay, yep.
You don't want to do that. The forks are already blocking the airflow there.
Yeah, okay.
So you're not really going to do much.
Yeah,
you actually don't be scared of blocking some airflow, and the middle of the radiator is the right spot to do it. A couple of reasons. If you put a strip or two in the middle, you're going to restrict the flow to the main part of the airflow, which is going to get your engine warmer. The other thing too is you stop at a set of lights and the bike gets warm, gets up to 100 and the fans switch on. They're generally on the side of the radiator.
Yep.
So if you were to put the tape there, you'd be restricting the fan. So if you put it in the middle, you're restricting the airflow at speed, but you're not restricting the fan when you're stationary. So it'll still work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why the middle is the key.
Yeah.
And then if you ride along, and as the day gets nicer, we start at 8:30 in the morning, whatever going through, it's bloody cold. I might have 3 strips of radiator tape. And then by the time we get to lunch, I might be left with 1. And then in the afternoon, I might have none. And then as it gets later, I might have to put a couple back on. You don't have to be that fastidious, but while you're riding between 75 and 95, situations where you're going through the twisties, having fun, and your bike's running like high 60s, low 70s, you need to try and avoid that. It's not the best thing for the engine, particularly on this first part of the ride, because the oil temperature hasn't even got up. Exactly that. That if it is running cold and you can't avoid it, just be a bit gentle with a bit kind to it.
Yep.
Particularly, the tuning side of it's one thing, but particularly the engine materials, that's important.
Yep.
That's way more important than specifically how you run your engine when it's rebuilt. It's keeping it in the right temperature zone, because the materials will change their properties. With temperature, and they need to be up to temperature. About it, your bike, the manufacturer has different oil recommendations. You have oil galleries, oil pressure, and oil pump. Now, when it's all cold, not only is the oil behaving a little bit differently, but all the tolerances for the bearings, plain bearings, crankshaft bearings, all that sort of stuff, your camshafts in the journals, all those tolerances aren't in their optimal area. Oil's not in their optimal area, so you're going to generate more wear. So you should, and then the next thing is, the harder you rev a motor, the more elastics the materials need to be, because the speed of the piston going up and down in the conrod, for example, there's quite a bit of weight attached, and they're rotating so fast. A bad boy like this one, an R6, the amount of piston speed these things have when they're close to 16,000 RPM is ridiculous. They're going up and down hundreds of times per second. So if you were to think about the weight of one conrod attaching a piston, and it's doing that hundreds of times per second, it's a lot going on, and it needs to be a bit elastic. So if it's all too cold and you do that enough, you're going to create a crack or a fatigue point or a fracture point somewhere. So if you can't avoid it, great thing that you pick that up is keep the revs lower and be kind to it.